Hello everyone, it's Uncle Navi, and I have my nice glass of water. I can make fun of my Baltimore friends. I have a lovely scented candle to, set the mood. And I have a captive audience in the form of Pupper, who is wearing her cutest, pinkest bandana. And I have a brand new microphone because I have been led to understand that my headset was not working very well, and either it was picking up the sound of my air conditioner, my neighbors, or my beard generally scruffing against it. So we're gonna see if this one works more gooder. All right. And Helva was stuck again, waiting with her lock wide open and her lift at ground level immobilized. He'd said she was beautiful. He had an extrapolation made from her chromosome pattern. It cost a fortune to even make a solido. Before Beta Corvi or Borealis? Oh gods, had he gotten a hold of her medical records? No, that would have revolted a man with Niall's predilection for the nubile. She felt like giggling. Wasn't she nubile and young? Of course, the easy-knowing way in which he inferred startling sexual prowess might be elusive. No, small men were often compensated for their... Yeah, I'm not going to read that part. But her face... I don't want to die by blushing, so I'm not going to read that part. Suffice to say, she's thinking wicked things. But her face was beautiful, he'd said, even if it was only by way of an artificial extrapolation. It pleased her. He was unlikely to use that adjective lightly. She would have to be beautiful for him to say she was. The concept of being beautiful was both reassuring and disturbing. Shell people were conditioned not to think of their personal appearance, never saw any repros of themselves. These two were high-security secrets. Evidently nothing was secret or sacred to the determined. Niall had managed to get the new release syllables, supposedly known only to Chief Riley, and hypno-locked into that mind as an added precaution. She was beautiful. Niall had said so. Where was he? Oh, men have died and the worms have eaten them, but not for love. She giggled unexpectedly at the ridiculous line that floated into her mind. Men had dared more for beauty, however, particularly beauty unattainable, than for any other single motivation. For legendary Helen's beauty had Troy fallen. For the beauty of gold and gems, others had risked life, superstition, and freedom. For the beauty of knowledge, men had strained and died. For the beauty of a principle, a host of fanatics of every moral persuasion had perished. Oh, principle, not principal. She didn't want Niall dying for her, beautiful or not. She wanted him at the pilot's console. A channel opened. Yes? Oh, what a charming welcome, a familiar voice replied. It was not Niall's, and her surge of relief died. Who is it? What an insulting change, my dear. Oh, hello, Broly. I was expecting another call, but I'm always glad to hear from you. It was impolitic to antagonize a city shell person, particularly when it was Broly, and especially not right now. She might need his help. Oh, you sounded so glad, and I sincerely trust that your anticipated caller is not a rival. Rival? Oh, yes, yes! And a touch of asperity crept into Broly's voice. Helva brought herself up, sharp. Broly wouldn't be so affable unless he wanted something. I understand, and his voice was suave again, that you have reached payoff. I don't trust you to find out. Aha, then you haven't made any commitments yet. Oh, sorry, Broly, I extended my Central Worlds contract. You extended? With Central Worlds? Broly's voice was an appalled whisper. And I always thought you were a keen one. For the love of printed circuits, why did you have to go through such an irrational, acid-headed, sour-faced, debasing thing like that? Don't you realize that I have 4 individuals and two 2 planets lined up, ready to bid themselves out of a decade of profits to get a 6-month contract with a BB ship like you? Whatever possessed you to do it? I'm stunned. I'd better check my own acid level. You put me out with your folly. I'm speechless. Somehow, Broly's exacerbations revived her. The grasping, greedy, gossiping, cynical city shell person reinforced her previous decision. There probably were 6 bidders waiting to cut each other's financial throats for her, but she was certain that she wouldn't enjoy working their contracts, whatever they were. There would be all the unpleasantness with the losers. Despite every shortcoming, Central Worlds at least worked for the good of the total Federation, not for the aggrandizement of one isolated star system, or a mercenary monopoly. Broly, speechless? Helva asked with a creditable laugh. Oh, you don't sound it. Paralon conned you, didn't he? Broly countered quickly. Helva could almost see his mind correlating bits and pieces of eavesdropped comments and private assumptions to reach that conclusion. But how much had he guessed, and how much was actual knowledge? She knew Broly prided himself on anticipating events. It made him an extraordinarily capable city manager. The sprawling Regulus metropolis, immense, complicated, catering to a dozen subraces as well as the huge humanoid population, operated smoothly without transportation slowdowns, work crises, or material shortages, all under Broly's supervision. But he always had a circuit open for trouble and rumor. He loved trouble, and said it kept him young. But he relished rumor and was not above spreading some of his own simply to keep amused. Paralon's my supervisor, she replied airily, but I'd a few changes of my own. Ah, you did bargain, then? Yes, I did. And to restore myself to your good opinion, if they don't produce, the extension is void. Oh, I do feel better. You wouldn't care to name the conditions. Bored, Broly? I've your best interest at heart, Helva. You're one of my favorite people. Ever since that first brawn of yours fought 5 fleet bullies to a pulp because they laughed at your singing. Just like Broly to remind her of Genin. And right now, well, he'd learned the conditions anyhow, so she'd better tell him and keep him friendly. Well, the CV drive, he bellowed at her first mention. You are out of your mind, Helva. I'll just keep those industrials around for you, my dear. He sounded very smug. The CV's that hazardous? Oh, my dear Helva, they can't have been honest about it with you. Didn't you hear what happened to the test ship? 9 years out, I'm told, but you know perfectly well that a shell person is far better equipped to handle delicate circuitry than any mobile. Oh, balls! Broly interrupted her. I never get time for a decent chat, but something has to go wrong. She was grateful to whatever emergency had interrupted them. A little of Broly's cynicism went a long way. When she'd been in the service as long as he, would she be as misogynistic and sour? Or as impassive as Sylvia, living through years of quiet desperation on the off chance that there might be a moment of beauty, of love tomorrow? And where was Niall? He must have calmed down enough to think straight by now. Hours had passed since he left. He must have realized that theirs could be a brilliant partnership, rich and full. He was wasted as a supervisor. Why, they'd pay off the CV debt in contract time, if not sooner, with both of them working to that end. Then she wouldn't worry about being independent. No one could harm her with Niall as brawn. If Niall would be her brawn. She glanced outside hopefully, surprised that the quick equatorial darkness had closed down on Regulus Base. Lights were few in the tower, shining only at duty stations and odd offices. She remembered she'd turned on only the lift audios when she'd landed. Now, as she turned on others, she heard muted metal sounds from the distant maintenance shops and the measured tread of the ceremonial sentry parading in front of the tower. Another of the service's archaic whimsies, Helva thought. knowing that highly specialized sensors around the base could detect the mere passage of a night insect, identify and destroy it if noxious before the human guardian could react to a more visible or audible invasion. But the sentries about face clatter was comforting. She did not feel so alone. Some old traditions did have a special place from which there was no modern substitute. Like, damn, Broly, why did he mention Jenin? Broly could locate Nile for her, but he'd want to know the details, and he was unlikely to be sympathetic to her need. According to Broly, Shell people ought to be autonomous as well as self-sufficient. She hastily answered the strident call signal. Well, Paralon may not have conned you into all he planned, but he's certainly celebrating something. Broly was at his churlish best. And he started off by tangling up 15 air cushion vehicles and 3 mass transporters, and that sheared off 2 transmitter masts. Why he wasn't killed, I don't know, but there wasn't a scratch on him for the 3 other females with him. Fortunately, no one was more shaken in the other cars, but was more than shaken in the other cars, but he's been fined a stiff 1,000 credits for such irresponsible behavior. And he had the nerve to laugh. If he weren't a service supervisor with plenty of pull, he'd have been sent down to cool off for a few months. And it's all your fault. I'll be glad to see you go. Oh, Fartles, he's at the vanishing point, and now I have to drag on emergency monitors to ensure order there. If he thinks he can get away with 2 civil misdemeanors in one night, he is vastly mistaken. I will not have my city disrupted by Paralon's egregious escapades. Having vented his spleen, he broke the connection. Paralon was trying to kill himself. She could understand the vanishing point visit. The house was notorious for the variety and ingenuity of its entertainments. Most planets had several such establishments, particularly in spaceport cities, and most Bronze were regular customers. It was too unsettling to contemplate his activities there. She devoutly wished that the Shell people were allowed the surcease of sleep. They ought to have some way to dispense with mental activity, some refuge from unbearable thoughts. Disobediently, her mind ranged back to the Vanishing Point house and its reputations. 2 households, alike in dignity, she began, in a resolute voice that echoed through the empty cabins. She wondered, would the solar-praying Korviki understand her gratitude for this pastime? A channel opened, and it was no surprise to hear Broly's sharp voice, but he sounded puzzled, not irritated. Did you get Nile Paralon discharged for cornering you into that extension? No, I didn't. Just asking. I simply can't imagine why he's acting the way he is. It just isn't like the Paralon I know. Well, what's he doing? The question was out before Helva could reflect. Well, he was doing his usual. Now he seems to have lost what little sense all that strong drink left him. In fact, the monitors were all set to close in when he calls the house jeweler, buys all the girls a bauble to remember him by, he says, and he goes home. Alone, what's more, and you'll never guess what he's doing now. Well, not unless you tell me. He's got an effects buyer in, and he's selling off his furnishings, his paintings, his artifacts, his tapes. He spent a fortune on that collection, and he wanted to get half of it back. He sold his air car, and he's selling his wardrobe. Helva tried to quench the sudden hope this news generated, a symbolic rejection of a closed part of his life. Why? Niall knew that Bronze kept a home in some port of call. Why should he sell off? Not unless... Oh, she refused to consider that alternative. You would have heard, Broly was saying, if he and Riley had another one of their fights. I haven't heard a word from CENTCOM all night. You'll remember Broly, won't you, if you do? Yes, Broly, I'll remember you. Could the girls and the drinking at the VP house, the farewell jewels, all be part of a bachelor night out? Caesar and Cleopatra occupied her until dawn, until the technicians and computer men poured back into the base complex to divert her. An urgent beep from CENTCOM, and then Riley was on the line bellowing. What in the hell does Paralon mean, handing in a resignation? What are you up to now, Helva? Let me speak to him now! He's not on board. Not on board? Where is he? I don't know. And I suppose you also don't know that Paralon left a resignation on my desk to foul up my morning, that he cited paragraph 5, sub-article D. I'll say he's suffering from a mental aberration. He's out of his mind. If you two think you can put something else over on the service after that performance yesterday... Riley's angry ranting trailed off. All right, Helva. He began again in a patient voice. What happened after we cleared out? I thought the whole matter was settled. Paralon was the brawn of your choice, and you two would handle Beta Corvi mission as outlined. So what happened? A partnership is formed by the mutual consent of both parties, Helva replied, repeating slowly and carefully. There had been a dangerous edge to Riley's voice, an unspoken threat, and the astounding implication that she and Niall had prearranged yesterday's events. And that was why Niall had resigned, trying to stay one jump ahead of Riley, who would certainly have tried to coerce him back on board. So Niall Paralon had made his decision. That was why he'd sold everything off, to have enough money to get away from Regulus beyond Riley's authority. It was very difficult to think clearly, and she must keep her wits for Niall's sake. If that was what he had to do, she wouldn't let anything hinder him. I am aware of that definition of partnership, Helva, Riley said acidly. And Niall was not agreeable to the partnership. Now see here, Helva, no more garbage. Niall Paralon begged to join the service 12 years ago when he found out he was too damn short to be a brawn. Since he made supervisor, he's been telling brawns how to manage their missions, their brains, and their lives. You can't tell me that when Niall Paralon got a ship to the point where she'd opt him as brawn, he'd sheer off? Well, I'll tell you, X-Ray Hotel 834... Well, I'll tell you, X-Ray Hotel 834, he's going to make that Beta Corvi mission, or he'll be in irons for the rest of his life. Irons? Helva thought wildly. Another service holdover? How ridiculous of Riley to think he could iron Niall Paralon. Calm down and think. Riley would soon find out Niall had sold everything. She'd better lift, and the shrill keen of overworked air cars roused her. She ran an automatic check and saw a full squad deploying at her base. Round 1 to Riley. Broly, she began as soon as she got through. Broly, you've got to warn Paralon. Riley's after him and out for blood. Oh, really? Broly was delighted. Paralon's on his way to the spaceport now. He'd got an under-the-counter ticket from the effects buyer. I just found out. When's liftoff? At 0900, but... Warn Paralon that Riley's out to stop him. He's mounted a guard at my base, so I'm stalemated, and the next place he'll close off is the spaceport. Oh, Helva! Really? Paralon is service! Not anymore. Remember, he resigned. That's why Riley wants to keep him on Regulus. But if Paralon has tendered his resignation, Riley has no authority to stop him. Broly, you? Naive? That extension with Riley is void unless Paralon goes as my brawn on the Beta Corvi mission. Oh, Riley will stop him, Broly agreed, and then realized what Helva had admitted. You tried to con Paralon into being your brawn? Broly had a laugh like a dying amphibian, probably from lack of use, Helva thought, but at least he was not annoyed by the choice information she'd withheld. Oh, my dear girl, you are fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Why, that man's pure stud. He'd never lock himself away on a brawn celibacy. Great heaving gods, maybe he would. He sent those girls away last night. Listen to me, Broly. Warn Niall now that Riley is out to secure his hide for that contract. Oh, easy, dearie. If Paralon stays missing, the contract's void? Yes, yes! Well, then you be free to listen to my bidders. She'd half expected that bargain, so she agreed. Riley's a bad enemy, Helva. He can do nothing to me without Paralon, and if he tries, I'll call Double M and Sprim. Oh, them! Broly Broly was contemptuous. They have their uses, like right now. But my bidders, my will my bidders have first chance? I agreed, didn't I? Now warn Paralon and then forget where you called him. Oh, he's in a public cab, but I'm to remember which one, with all I have on my mind, managing this city? Broly was chuckling as he broke the connection. Lock himself away in celibacy. That's what Broly had said, but Niall had called her beautiful. There had been such desire in his voice, in the wiry body straining against her metal barrier. He'd wanted to look at her, to hold her. That long night after she had returned from Beta Corvée, he'd come to keep her company, and he must have been obsessed with her then. That's why he had suggested that she take Kurla's empty body. How could she have been so dense not to realize what prompted that bizarre conversation? Her body that could not function as a body, inhabited by a soul that was all too human, and Kurla's body, a body that was only flesh, nubile, tactile, beautiful, and soulless. She could have been tangible for him, to be used by him, able to experience that ultimate gift of self. Maybe if Kurla's body had not been appropriate. No. Absolutely, she rejected such devastating thoughts. Broly would keep his word. He'd warned Niall. The rest was up to the man. She was sure he could keep free long enough for Riley to cool off. He had plenty of money. You could always buy safety. But Riley was a bad enemy. Broly had been right about that. However, an unwilling BB ship is an immovable object. Even if Riley could catch Niall, she'd only refuse him admittance. She wanted no reluctant brawn. Reluctant? Yes, that was the key word. How droll that the first man she'd wanted as brawn since Jenin died would prove reluctant. Well, we lose perspective, we Shell people, and we forget that not everyone is eager to share our destiny. But Niall had wanted to be a brawn. When he couldn't qualify physically, he'd raised himself to supervise a whole section of bronze. And then she had come along, coy and stubborn, and forced him to throw away everything he'd achieved, rank, prestige, and luxury. Broly? Oh, now what? You warned him. I said I would, and I did. I also made a few pointed remarks about his behavior and a warning of my own about such future embroilments. Oh no, she groaned inwardly. Broly preaching to Niall in this state of mind. Well, where's Paralon now? I can't tell you what I don't know. You must have some idea. None. But you'll be the first to hear when I have. In the meantime, you'd better check your acid level, dear. Broly signed off in that snide advice. She had to get in touch with Niall. She'd work with another brawn if he would stay on as supervisor. She couldn't allow him to sacrifice everything on her account. She scanned outside anxiously. The area was heavy with small craft traffic. Riley was mounting an intensive search. If Broly wouldn't help, how could she find Niall? Well, there was another way to accomplish the same end, and it was the patent that Riley's objective was to proceed with the Beta Corvée thing. All right, then. Before she could open a channel, a signal came through from the tower. Riley advised her with stiff formality to open her comm screen. The picture cleared to show Riley, shoulders thrown back, eyes straight ahead, and unfocused, sitting at a littered desk, an aide hovering fearfully in the background. There were two other men in the room. The older one, with a sad face, wore the Sprim uniform of green and gold. The other man was younger, with a taciturn expression and shrewd eyes. He looked completely at ease and idly tapped the elegant boot of his crossed leg. Captain Amaking of Sprim and Mr. Rocco of Double M are here to answer to a complaint registered on your behalf, X-Ray Hotel 834. Riley's voice was grim as his expression. Yeah, our informant says yous have enough credits for your last assignment here, Helva, to pay off. Rocco smoothly interjected, appearing not to notice that Riley hadn't finished his prefacing remark. Some Federation credits are still pending, Helva replied, conceding it politic to be truthful, particularly if it would leaven Riley's anger. The credits are in, but, Riley began. Then the original financial obligation incurred by the X-Ray Hotel 834 has been satisfied, Emma King asked in a gentle voice. Well, yes, however. Well, the contingent of servicemen clustered so congenially on the landing pad occupied by Helva there than to protect her from the importunities of independent bidders, Rocco asked. Riley compressed his lips into a very thin line as he stared coldly back at the Double M representative. Otherwise, it looks very much like this is a form of moral restraint. For Helva, this could certainly not. Helva could certainly not remove herself if she so desired, without charring them, which a BB ship cannot do. They ought to withdraw immediately. This is a service base, Mr. Rocco. Immediately, Chief Riley, or Captain Emmicking and I will be forced to suspect coercion. The Double M agent smiled indolently, but his voice did not. Riley barked at his aide, who fumbled with the comm unit. Almost instantly, the men on her landing site began to disperse. They left, Alba? Yes, Mr. Rocco. But you must understand that I extended my Central Worlds contract. So I'd heard, Rocco remarked, his eyes glittering as he turned politely to her. Which makes a guard totally uncalled for. However, I'd also heard that one of your conditions of the extension specifically requested... one of the conditions specifically requested by you cannot now be filled through circumstances beyond your control. Therefore, that contract is invalid. That contract is not invalid until Central Worlds has failed to fulfill that condition, Riley said, emphasizing his words with an angry fist on his desk. That I will not do because that will knock my microphone on the floor. Which they cannot do, Rocco countered with equal emphasis. Niall Paralon was the brawn of your choice, isn't that correct, Helva? Yes, but he has resigned from the service and is no longer available. Niall Paralon will be on board the X-Ray Hotel 834 by nightfall, Riley bellowed, rising to his feet to tower over the others. That condition will be met and the contract assignment will proceed. If you can find Niall Paralon, Rocco amended. Gentlemen, this is ridiculous, Helva said, raising her voice to be heard. Yes, I wanted Niall Paralon as my partner. I am sorry that he could not oblige me. I deeply regret that he felt it necessary to resign from the service to emphasize that reluctance. But I would not coerce him into accepting an onerous duty. Hound him. I'd rather discuss another brawn assignment. Why, you fickle-minded, double-crossing, wire-haired, tin-assed martyr! A rasping voice roared from her main corridor. You'll discuss another brawn assignment? Niall Paralon stood by the open drive room hatch, his torn mechanic coverall grimed, his angry face scratched and smeared. Oh, don't try to fool me, Helva. That's Paralon, Riley yelled from the comm screen. It is, and I will deal with him first, Riley, Helva cried. She cut the connection, slammed the lock shut, activated the tamper-proof shield on her hull. She was going to thrash this out right now. What do I mean by discussing another brawn assignment? What alternative did you leave me, you drunken, womanizing, leader-sized knave? How else can I get Riley to lift the search and let you free? Well, free? Who's free? The moment I leave you alone, you're ready to sell yourself right back into slavery. Of all the stupid, half-brained, short-sighted, farting, foolish, Helva sputtered with rage and indignation. Look at you selling off 7 years of hard work and rank because you're too damned bed-happy to go on one lousy mission for me. Force me to mortgage my soul for the second time in 2 days. Oh! Rocco and Emmicking got there, didn't they? They were to see Riley before he got out of bed to be sure you'd be free. Next thing I know, that queen gossip Broly is telling me there's a full search on, and... His agitated recital broke off. He gritted his teeth. His eyes flashed so angrily that Helva knew that Broly's sermon had been read in pure vitriol. Rocco and Emma King are with Riley now, aren't they? He asked with considerably less vehemence. Yes, they are. She matched her tone to his, too relieved to have him safely on board to prolong a quarrel. And you'd better have a sound explanation for Riley if in Nothing Flat, because there is a no-nonsense penetration team assembling on the pad, and Riley knows my release syllables too. Niall didn't need that reminder as he heard the penetration team clank against the outer hull. Not a good enough reason to use the word penetrate! You fool, you could have been all clear, he murmured, more desperate now than angry. Just the Beta Corvée mission, Niall, that's all he wants. Niall jerked his head up. I don't think it's that simple, even for Riley. If the CV drive's good, I'm ahead of the game, she said. If it's a bust, then I'm free, and so are you. Free? Niall repeated softly, but there was an odd grin on his tired face. He put one hand out, gently stroked the panel, sensitive fingertips finding and running along the all but invisible seam of her quarters. I'm no more free than you are, Helva, but, God's as my witness, I tried to get you out of this fartling foul contract I cooked up. Deliberately, he jammed one fist against the column, breaking the skin and bloodying his hand. Stop it, Paralon. If he couldn't settle a piddling 500,000 credit debt, or if we couldn't settle a piddling 500,000 credit debt in less than 10 years, we're not the team I think we are. He cocked his fist to strike again, but he stepped back, staring at her, eyes wide with surprise and hope. You know, you're right. You're absolutely right. Of course I am. And if you've got to exact penance, then get the hell on the comm and persuade Riley to call off that penetration team. He was already at the console, banging for vision, forgetting that Helva could do it faster for him. What the hell's going on here, Riley? Damn it all, can't a Braun leave his ship alone on a service base for sake without finding her subjected to some asinine indignity? I thought that nardy Beta Corvée flap had top priority. Where are the specs? Where are the Breslau's models? Where are Breslau's models? I need Dobronon's files. How in the hell can we lift off in 5 days unless you move those lazy techs? Paralon, Riley began, with full spleen to unload. You're under arrest. You're fined. I resign, remember, Riley? Niall roared back, gathering fresh impetus. You have no authority to fine, arrest, or order me anywhere. I'm a citizen of the Central Worlds, acting as a mobile partner to the Helva 834. She contracted a mission with you, stipulating in paragraph 6, section 1, that she would have free choice of the aforesaid partner, to wit, one Niall Paralon. There was nothing taped about the rank or status of said Niall Paralon, and if you think you can make something of it, my resignation is timestamped before those Federation credits came in. Therefore, before the contract extension took effect. Now, if you want to tie this ship up in a court battle over who bosses whom, go right ahead. But if you want to get this ship off her expensive ass to Beta Corvée to vet your lovely new power source, you'd better start moving. Helva should have known that Niall would neither explain nor humble himself, and perhaps such an offensive was the only effective method of dealing with Riley. She could feel sorry for the chief's aide, standing in paralyzed shock at Riley's elbow. She was glad for his sake, as well as theirs, that Rocco and Emma King were still there. In fact, she didn't doubt that Niall counted on their presence to force Riley to accept this bald revision of the facts. And the chief was going to have to accept this version. He had no choice and no recourse, not before representatives of powerful organizations that he could not antagonize. You'll move, Paralon, he vowed in a strangled voice. And you'll work like you've never believed a team could work. Oh, naturally. And one day, Riley grated out the words, one day, Paralon, you are going to outsmart yourself. No prophecies, Chief. Just the tapes and the models. Nice to see you, Rocco. Captain. Signing off. As the screen blanked, Niall turned back to Helva, his expression oddly defenseless. He'd give his pension to know. No, I already have, wouldn't he, Helva? He spoke in a quiet, resigned voice, but his wide grin took away the sting. And the look in his eyes, possessive, proud, loving, intensely alive, made Helva's mind reel with joy. They'd have come through the crisis together, after all. They could face any challenge. They knew each other better than she and Jenin ever had. They knew each other's strengths and their flaws. This was going to be a bright heaven with fireworks, a constant stretching towards challenge and achievement. Helva longed to extend this ardent moment. Such pure happiness was so rare and so fragile. Semcom beeped to shatter it. Mr. Paralon, I mean X-Ray November Hotel 834, a nervous voice stammered. Paralon here, he said without glancing away from her column, knowing she'd opened the channel. Sir, we can't use the lift to make delivery because Helva cut him off as she belayed the tamper field, restored the lift power, and slid the lock open. Ah, Fartles, what a way to take command. Look at me, Niall swore, suddenly aware of externals again, of the filthy clothes that he wore. I'd have been cleaner if they'd dragged me back. He began to strip off the torn clothes as he strode towards the pilot quarters. Order me some gear from the base quartermaster, Helva. They know my size. Tell someone to pick up a small black carrier on guard post 17. Oh, and yes, the perimeter sensors are shorted down between 17 and 18. He continued to give instructions while showering, dressed in the hastily delivered ship suit, grabbing a quick meal from the galley. Neither her lift nor comm circuits were free for a moment. The main cabin sprouted additional cables to accommodate the drive models and the tape files Dobronon rushed over. Niall sent for every film strip of the exploratory ship. He seemed indefatigable, yet he'd been up the previous night and running half the day. Riley could never work Niall as hard as he'd work himself and her. Hey, Helva, Niall said, suddenly, squinting towards the open lock. Turn on some light. I can barely see. I'd got no idea it had gotten so late. She scanned the equatorial dusk. Just then, the mellow brass voice of a trumpet from the top of base tower sounded the ceremonial day's end call. Day's end and requiem. The rich, measured notes floated over the great service base, out to the distant cemetery under the great trees. Once she'd heard it only as a requiem. Tonight, each day dies, Helva thought, to let night with its darkness for sorrowing, and sleep to complete its course and bring a new day. Taps, a simple, poignant statement of end and beginning. Day is done, gone the sun, from the sea, from the land, from the sky. All is well, rest in peace, God is nigh. Oh, thank you, Popper. I appreciate that. Goodbye, Jenin, and welcome, Niall. As the last note died away in dark space, and in her heart, she saw Niall's knowing eyes on her, wary and expectant. Such a sentimental tradition for a modern service, Helva murmured, blowing taps at sundown. And you love it, he said, unexpectedly, in a grating voice. You'd have tears in your eyes if you could. Yes, she admitted. I would if I could. It's a good thing I'm so nasty. Balances your soft heart, partner, he said. Helva, don't you ever change. And he might as well have been singing.
I just want to point out that Opal is very, very cute. With her extremely cute, very pink bandana. So. We have now finished The Ship Who Sang by Anne McCaffrey. I strongly encourage you to have your own copy of this book to keep on your bookshelf. Like I said, it is one of my favorites. And I'm probably going to go back and re-record because, well, somebody
mention that the audio quality has basically been terrible for all but one of the videos. So, but I'm gonna move on to another. I'm gonna move on to another book and then re-record occasionally. So. The next book is admittedly one that I'd seen the movie first and then read the book. And if you have ever wanted to see Robert De Niro dress in drag and do the can while a bunch of sky pirates beat the ever-living snot out of, well, bad people, or less than good people, I cannot stress enough how much I enjoy the movie. And one of my very favorite authors. So next up, I will be reading Neil Gaiman's Stardust. And after that, I'm probably going to move on to Neverwhere. Because honestly, I've been kind of excited to reread it. So, in the meantime, if people can hate without reason, then I can love you exactly the same way. So, I love you very much, puppy. Yes, you are my good girl. I love you very much.
Opal wants to be included.
Yeah, you're my good girl, and I love you very much.
Alright. So, you have important things to deal with tomorrow. Much more important than sitting here listening to me. So, get some rest and do your best. And you'll see me next time. Good night.